All right, it seems we are on. We're gonna spend a couple seconds to make sure everybody is properly logged in, that everybody is properly connected. Hi, Jacques. All well? Very good.
Oh, well, excited for the session.
Yes, very, very good. And really nice to have so many of you join, and we are recording the session. So that is also going to be available for those who cannot be at the live one. But in respect of everyone's time, in respect of everyone's attention span, we're going to get started. We have 45 intense minutes that we are going to spend on discussing this wonderful topic, how to use AI for EU officials. And we gave the subtitle Expertise, Policy Implementation, and Confidentiality. Now, our pace is going to be a little fast. Hopefully, that's not going to be too fast. You can completely follow everything we say, because we want to share as much as possible in these in the short time span and make it very practical, very actionable, everything that we will cover. So the technical part, hopefully everybody can hear us, everybody can see us. If there's any concern, that you can restart your browser if you're watching it in the browser, or there's an app for Click Meeting and there's the meeting code that you can log in through that. But part of the slides and the entire recording will be shared afterwards. So you're going to be able to go back to it and look up things that we have discussed. As I said, part of the slides, so not necessarily everything, but most of it will be there. And those of you who are at the live session right now, you will certainly hear and see everything. Please use the chat box and ask us questions. We will try to answer them as we go along. If we cannot, we'll find a way to follow up on that. But just to get your fingers warmed up and be familiar with the interface, why don't you type into the chat box which EU institution you work at, whether you are involved with or connected to. We're just curious to see how many of you are not from the European Commission, but also those at the Commission. Obviously, please put that in. We appreciate that. And certainly that's the largest employer of EU staff. So that is interesting. Some of you are from digits, from agencies, Commission, mostly Commission so far. So that is very helpful. AREA, the Research Executive Agency, and many others, and representation. Thank you so much. So let's get started and say a few words about ourselves. Jacques, if you want to introduce yourself, please go ahead.
Sure. Yes, so my name is Jacques Foul. I'm a digital communication consultant, and I'm really passionate about the topic of AI. I've worked in the European bubble for many, many years, doing creative campaigns and running workshops. So a couple months ago, when we had this conversation with Andras to launch these series, I was really excited about sharing all the knowledge and all the tips and tricks about AI and how we can use it in a public affairs context.
And about myself, some of you know my work, perhaps through the EPSO universe and EPSO competitions, where I run or co-run a company that helps prepare candidates for those competitions. But I do a few other things. And the most recent one, so to say, is being involved with influence builders and focusing on AI, not just as an esoteric subject, but something that has deep practical implications for everyone dealing with European affairs, public affairs, diplomacy, and related fields. So with that, Jacques, you might want to say about the stuff that we've done so far and things that others may be interested in?
Sure. So far, we've been training many public affairs and communication professionals, over 100 now. We have created also custom AI workshops. So the wait list is open if you would like to work with us and collaborate on how we can use these tools. We've also launched a monthly Substack newsletter because this is a way for us to go a little bit deeper into how we do things and how we see things evolve in the space when it comes to AI and public affairs. And we also just publish on a daily basis, almost daily, AI tips and tricks on LinkedIn. So if you are not familiar with all these things, feel free to reach out. So there's a newsletter, there's the LinkedIn, and there's also the custom workshops.
Yeah, and we encourage you. You can follow us on our LinkedIn accounts, and that's where we are probably the most active. And that's a bit of an incubator for our ideas and concepts, where we solicit feedback and conversations of things we are experimenting with and things that we've discovered.
Yes, and today is a little bit, it's a part of our webinar series, so it's a very special session today. We've talked about EU trade associations, NGOs. Today's it's going to be about EU officials, but then we have more sessions coming up tomorrow, Friday, and Monday for communication professionals, public affairs consultants, and MEPs and their assistants.
So with that, yes, before I actually get into my part, Jacques, you wanted to cover what we're not going to cover.
So obviously, there's a lot of things to talk about. There's a lot of things around AI at the moment. But we really wanted to say that we're not going to cover any policy issues. So anything related to the EU AI Act. We're not going to go through any issues with AI ethics, even though this is a key topic when it comes to bias and data privacy and many other topics. We're not going to go through AI's impact on society and jobs, although we do have our own perspective on things. We think that it's going to dramatically revolutionize the way we do things. And we're also tool agnostic, so we're not going to favor one tool over another. Although ChatGPT is going to be one of the tools that we're going to show here with most of the examples. So this is just a caveat, just a disclaimer for what is about to happen in this session.
And just to add 2 points on that, one is Gemini and ChatGPT tend to be the most well-known AI or large language model tools in use, but there is also one called Claude Sonnet, which is at the 3.5 version right now. That's a really powerful one. And again, we're not going to go into any particular detail about the differences, but some tools are better at certain tasks than others. Another point is that I'm aware that the Commission has already rolled out, and somewhat in an experimental way, is working with GPT at EC. And there is also the JRC, the Joint Research Center, is also developing or using some of its tools. So I'll have short references to those, which are enterprise level, so to say, so higher security, more ring-fenced versions of stuff that are publicly available. Jacques, back to you.
And obviously, our ambition for today is to spark your curiosity, because there's a lot of things we probably don't know, or we don't know how to use these tools. So the idea is to give you some insights and some examples of what could work in your situation. We also want to encourage you to experiment, to test, to pilot certain tools, to go through some of the examples that we have, to just test things and experiment. And we also want you to get inspired, and to inspire new ways of thinking, and inspire new techniques and new ways of using these tools to integrate them in your daily work. So hopefully by the end of the session, you'll be more curious, you're going to be able to experiment more, and you're going to get inspired from all the examples that we have ready.
And maybe just a shout out to DG Digit, and I understand there are participants from there who, and they are working on practical applications, generally for public administration. They are tracking some best practices and different use, and also developing certain tools for in-house use inside the Commission. So that is a very interesting development, and perhaps we give some ideas or a little bit of inspiration there of what might be possible. And I just wanted to share with you first just more than a thought experiment, more of a practical experiment I did. So Google came out with not just Gemini, their large language model, but an experimental feature called Notebook LM. And that's available for anyone with a Google account, where you can basically feed in any document, and even large documents. Then you can interact with those. Just for the sake of example, yesterday I fed in the European Institution style guide. So the spelling, the abbreviation use, and all of that, which is a huge document. I think it's almost 150-page long document, perhaps even larger. ChatGPT often struggles with that large of a document, or it doesn't do a very good job analyzing it. but Google, this Notebook LM did. But one experimental feature they have is you feed in any kind of document and it turns that into a podcast. So two people chatting about the contents of a document. So I fed in the commissioner designate's mission letter, just the executive VPs, and I said, okay, have a conversation about that. So it was just a fun experiment. You can listen to the audio on the Influence Builders website, and somewhere buried in my LinkedIn feed, I also posted about it, so you can find that if you're interested. Again, this is a fun thing, not necessarily with a lot of practical application, but Jacques will present what we're coming up with as on a more practical level.
Absolutely. So our first part is about talking about the best practices when you're using AI. And before we talk about anything, we have to talk about something really key here. It's the fact that using ChatGPT has its own potential risks when it comes to data privacy, in the sense that these models are training themselves based on the data that you give them. So in ChatGPT, for example, if you go into the settings in the data control, you can basically switch on this function that tells ChatGPT not to train its models based on your data. So it's really key when you're using these tools to first think about not sharing sensitive information. So to really protect the data that you're sharing. So anonymizing it can help, but also to go into the settings and see if there's anything you can do to make sure that these tools are not being trained based on your data. So this is sort of something to keep in mind and a rule to keep in mind when you're using these AI tools to make sure that you're protecting your data.
And just to add to that, now obviously at an institution like the Commission or any institution for that matter, data protection confidentiality is paramount. So you already have instructions of what you can or cannot put into systems like this one. That's why you have your own internal systems, or some of it is being developed and being deployed at different DGs and different departments. So it's always up to your very best professional judgment as to what you feed into a public GPT, even if you have an account and you've turned off this feature that Jacques has just outlined, versus having an internal tool, which may have certain limitations compared to the public ones, but for good reason. So it's up to be very careful to know what you feed into where. But even certain data sets can be sanitized before feeding into any such system, so you can remove personally identifiable information while still leveraging, harnessing the power of these tools by feeding that into or using it in that regard.
And perhaps maybe the first question we would like to ask you, so type your response in the chat. What challenges have you faced when using AI or ChatGPT in your work?
And we're curious to hear, but there are quite a few recurring answers that we often get for this question. So we have a certain expectation, but please type into the chat box what you get. And then we will spend the next 30 or so minutes giving you ideas and very specific practices where those could be mitigated. So here's one from Fernando. Wrong references. Let's see what else. Type that in of what frustrations you had. Lack of accuracy from Audrey. What else? And I think these two general, not tried yet. Okay, we encourage you to try it. Anand. And errors, yes. So inaccuracy, not incorrect formulations. And with too large documents, it doesn't work well. All right, sources are not quoted. So, well, good news is we have a couple ideas in that regard. But before we get there, I wanted to share with you this brainchild of mine, which I was thinking about the different use cases, different uses of ChatGPT. And by no means I claim this is scientific, even though I made a reference to Maslow's pyramid of hierarchic systems. Well, on a very basic level, you can use these tools for fun and entertainment, just like I did with that podcast generator and document analytical tool, but for no professional particular reason. But on a more serious note, you can use AI tools, ChatGPT or other tools to simple task automation. So you can have it proofread documents, create summaries, and do things which you're already doing and you could be doing, but it saves you a bit of time. It saves you a bit of effort to actually to do that, and it makes it more efficient. But then the next one is the workflow optimization, where it can really speed up recurring things, stuff that you do all the time, data analysis. It could be even some recurring general email drafting, and mapping out the different steps of how you work. The next bit is the one I put in bold. I put it in nice purple, because that's where the true benefit of ChatGPT and similar tools is. And that is helping you with open-ended questions and helping you with creating something, be that a policy document, a briefing, an analysis, an impact assessment, what have you, brainstorming, concept creation. And the most powerful thing is cross-referencing different kinds of document. When you're overlaying different inputs and to say, okay, help me come up with something more than just the sum of its parts. And you'll see in a few seconds what exactly I mean, because there are a lot of examples that I try to come up with to demonstrate the concept. And then the kind of the cherry on the pie or crown jewel here is custom applications, where these are often tools which are openly out there online, or if the commission does the security vetting and they say, okay, we can use that in our systems, which are using the power of AI, but with a very accessible, very customer-friendly interface. So that is typically what you have, the GPT at EC, and that I'm very certain that there will be many other tools which are more purpose-built, purpose-driven for specific tasks that you are working on in respective DGs and departments of the commission. But again, this could be a chatbot like the one I mentioned, which is a custom way of using the power of this engine, because it's a multi-purpose engine, but we want to use it for specific tasks. So the reason why you have an internal app already is because there are tasks and there are documents and there are certain use cases that require utmost trust, it requires confidentiality, and very importantly, requires a lot of context. And that is something we're going to come back to in some sense, where the ChatGPT and these tools are very smart, but they are ignorant because they don't know the context in which you are asking the questions. So if I tell Jacques, tell me what's your favorite food, he say, okay, well, right now I'm in the US, it's probably going to be different of what I like to eat than if I'm in Portugal or in Brussels or elsewhere. And okay, it's the same person, but when I ask him a short open question like that, the context may be missing. So I need to provide that. And in your professional work, obviously, is your director general going to meet a committee in the European Parliament? But which committee? I need to provide that context. Where is a policy file in the procedure? It's going to be very different depending on where that is. So that context needs to be given, and often you may not want to give that to a public open system. And also the output format. Well, we know how the Commission and other institutions operate with what's a note to a file and what's a non-paper and staff working document and all the others. They have a certain way of formatting, and also sometimes these. So it's finding, again, what is the proper use case and situation in which one tool or another can be or must be used. But having said that, just to demonstrate, so this is the Google's the Notebook LM, again, freely available for anyone. This is just a screenshot of when I fed in the different mission letters. Those are the documents on the left side. And well, even the style guide that I mentioned earlier, a very large document, this one seems to work with it very well. So if you have a public document or something that will not be compromised by feeding it into a public tool, this is a pretty good one, even better than using ChatGPT's similar functions. And I wanted to showcase one thing. This is a pilot project I'm working on, that I had this idea that it would be very interesting to create virtual personas. And these virtual personas would be mapped onto not actual people, but kind of typical people, so to say, in the sense that I create a person, I give it a name, I give certain demographics, certain attributes, political views, other values, basically creating an imaginary person, and say, okay, if I have a policy initiative, if I have a message, so it's more for communication in that case, to say, what would this person think? What would this person say? And ChatGPT is so powerful that it can impersonate, or it can imagine. Now, it's not imagining, but again, algorithmically, it can imagine that person and give me a feedback to say, well, in first person singular, that person says, well, I configure it who I am. I'm a commission official in DG Trade, and we are proposing this kind of trade defense instrument. What would that person, Ingrid Svensson, think of this particular instrument? So this is good just as much for policymaking as it is for communication testing purposes, and then I can adapt the message, and the tool can even give me ideas how to adapt or fine-tune my message. So it's just to showcase an interesting project, but also the capabilities of these tools. So here's a question. Jacques, you want to run that?
Sure. So what challenge could AI help you solve? So please type in the chat box what you think. What challenge could AI help you solve?
So let's see how much some of our examples that we're going to show you in a second will resonate with that. But we're curious, where do you see its possibilities, where you could actually use that in your daily work, professional work? What sort of challenge? Gain time. So that is probably a great idea because everyone is short on time. That's why we made this 45 minutes and not 1 hour. But in the workflows, a similar problem. Assess project proposals. So the reviewing assessment, which of course needs a lot of safeguards, but absolutely possible. Compile data in a certain way, update the letter, increase efficiency of processes. So all of these, there are use cases. Now, some are more technical, others are immediately accessible for you on a personal level. And right now, today, in this brief introduction, we are really focusing at the personal part. So what you can do personally and not necessarily as a unit or as a department. So with those ideas, and I see first draft of a speech, that's one of the examples we have here. So everyday use cases, I want to show you 6 ideas. And again, these are not a formal classification, but 6 sparks that hopefully can take you a bit further. So the first one, obviously, is on the bread and butter of the Commission and EU institutions, draft policy papers, briefings, notes, summaries. But not just the first draft, but connecting the source and the audience. So that's already a more sophisticated way of working with this, where, and this is a prompt example for that you can put into GPT or your custom tool, and to say, first, please analyze the background report that you attach, and say, identify the 10 most important aspects that a director in the European Commission's DG Energy can present at a conference for renewable energy experts from North Africa. So what did I just do? I provided who am I, who is the audience, what is the context, and then provided a background document that will make the answer far more relevant. And say, make sure to follow the attached templates format, so I can feed in a format in which I need the output, and make the style formal and add references to how our priorities fit into the audience's interest, right? So this basically connects what I have and what I want to get for the audience. So it makes it much more customized. It's not just a pure idea generation, but it's a targeted, relevant idea generation. The next one is to prepare for meetings and anticipate arguments, uncover blind spots in advance. So this one I like in particular because it's not just a pure briefing preparation, but I'm asking, using the tool to help me see what I don't see. So as an example, for a prompt of that kind, I say, I'm going to have a meeting on the revision of cohesion funds disbursement. These are the key arguments I'm going to make from the European Court of Auditors perspective. Okay, so this is who I am. This is the perspective I want to take. That's setting the scene. And then I say, the audience is a group of French, there's a duplication there, but a group of French mayors from all regions. So again, a well-defined audience. I'm not just saying, help me do a briefing. I'm saying, here is who I need that briefing for. And first highlight logical flaws and inconsistencies or missing elements in my briefing and reasoning. And you'd be surprised how powerful that is and how well that works. So feed in something, a document that you're comfortable feeding into a tool like that, and say, okay, tell me what I'm not seeing. And it is going to give you stuff. Now, maybe 8 things are not entirely relevant, are not exactly what you have in mind, but there might be 2 new ideas which you otherwise would have missed had you not fed that into the system. And so then anticipate 10 arguments or challenges I can expect from the audience and provide defensive points to these based on the above briefing. So I already want to be prepared with defensive points, so the system can anticipate pushback to those points and help you come up with defensive points if those are actually asked at the meeting. So you see, you take it really to the next level, that it's not just a briefing, but a very proactive, anticipatory kind of approach. Another one I wanted to share with you here is EU Matrix. Some of you may be familiar. It's run by a friend of mine, Doru, so EU Matrix used to be VoteWatch, which tracks the votes in the council and in the parliament. And this is from one of their public reports, which lots of graphs. And I say, okay, based on the data, the commission is proposing, say, a ban on diesel engines by 2035. What would be the most likely outcome of the vote in the Envy committee, right? That's the kind of the holy grail of political intelligence, where based on historic data, based on your specific use case, you are asking the system to analyze it and anticipate the likely scenario. Now, this is a very ambitious question, and probably we're not going to get a very accurate answer based on some rudimentary data. But the more robust the data set you put in, the more likely that you're going to get a very helpful, good prediction. So that's an interesting case where you're really basically collating databases and the political work. The next one is to understand complex background information, legislation, processes, and context. And if you feel lost about implementing and delegated acts, here's your time and your chance to finally understand it. So with those inside jokes apart, an idea that I want to share with you, I just took an ECJ judgment, so European Court of Justice judgment, and I said, okay, provide a bulleted reference summary of this judgment, focusing on all the points that are relevant for a policy officer at the Commission's DG TaxSud, right? So if you are working on tax matters, here's a judgment, and it's not only a summary I want a summary for me, for my particular policy area and my role. Another trick that you see in the prompt up there is I said a referenced summary. So I'm asking for references where a certain information comes from. So some of you commented earlier that one of your frustrations is that sometimes it makes up stuff, hallucinations as they call it, or the reference is unclear where it got that information from. Now, if you specifically, explicitly instruct GPT or your internal tool to say, point out where that piece of information is coming from, which page number on the PDF, you can cross-check it and you can see for yourself that it's accurate. Another one is I took complex background information. So I took here basically a commission proposal and then the amendments that the European Parliament adopted. And I said, well, take the Commission's proposal, and this one is on, I think I took this, with plant, basically novel breeding techniques, so plant and genetic engineering. I said, take your time. Isn't that a funny way of putting it? Take your time, you tell an algorithm, because it's so eager, it wants to give you answers fast. Now, if you specifically instruct, take your time or analyze it carefully, it's going to take a couple extra microseconds or a couple extra seconds to analyze it deeper, because the results will be better. So you say, take your time and carefully analyze the main points, and then take the text by the Parliament, and then provide a list of 10 of the most important changes that the Parliament proposed. And here's a fun or geeky little trick that I put there. Explain these points to a 10-year-old, provide references to the original PDF's page number for each part. So you see, I said, okay, explain that to a 10-year-old, meaning the language, the technicality of the explanation needs to be simple enough for a 10-year-old to understand. But you could say, explain it in technical terms because I'm a molecular biologist. Then the language, the output is going to be vastly different. And then this is pretty much the output, where I just wanted to demonstrate that the references are right there. You see, it says Amendment 167, page 2. So I can look it up. I can be sure that this is not hallucinating. It's not making up stuff, but it's accurate to the degree I need it. Number 4, analyze large data sets to extract the insights for policy and find inconsistencies or flawed reasoning. So another way to do that, you say, well, take this Excel sheet that shows, and I just came up with an idea, an example, youth unemployment trends in the EU 27 member states in the past 10 years. And I say, analyze it carefully. Again, this funny language to an algorithm. And say, provide 10 non-obvious insights relevant for European policymakings. So again, I'm trying to see what I otherwise may not see, but based on an Excel sheet and data input. The interesting thing is you can even take a screenshot of information and it can understand it. Now, of course, if the data is structured in an Excel sheet, results are going to be far more reliable and better. And then I say, propose measures that are worthy of considerations to tackle these issues. So I'm generating ideas, analysis and ideas that are relevant for me in the way I like to work. Number 5, create lookalike stakeholder groups to forecast policy impact. So it's a little similar to the one that I showed you earlier, that tool that we built the prototype of. And lookalike stakeholder group, now you can take it very far, as in a focus group and really the right demographics and others. But I could just simply do that with a hack. And that hack that I tried as an experiment, there is this great tool called Perplexity, perplexity.ai. Those of you who may not know it, I encourage you to check it out. It's Google on a higher level, so to say, and I'm sure Google itself will come up with features like this, because what it does, it's great for information retrieval when you're looking for specific information, but it takes it from multiple sources and blends it in a way that's very easy to understand and very presentable. So I said, for the sake of an experiment, what would be the 10 most typical characteristics of Spanish farmers? And then it gives me a list of 10 pieces of information based on statistics and surveys and all sorts of other sources. So it gave me a nice handy list. That's what I started with. And then I said, okay, so this I took from Perplexity, simply copied that into ChatGPT. And I said, okay, consider the following 10 characteristics of Spanish farmers. And I pasted the entire list that Perplexity provided me with. And then as a second point, I said, okay, anticipate and let me know how such a group would react to a zero tariff olive import from Morocco. Again, completely made up scenario, probably not that far from reality. And I say, okay, here's a certain demographic, and many of you are in policymaking, many of you are dealing with European level issues. And I say, okay, what can I expect? And this is not a Eurobarometer survey. This is not about commissioning a consultancy to run very deep experiments, but at least it gives you an idea in a simulated but realistic environment of what may be the impact and what may be the reaction. So think about this, and perhaps there are different ways that you can use a technique of this kind. And then the last one, perhaps closest to my heart, because I'm very passionate about communication, not just the tech, is the persuasion part. All of us are in persuasion, whether when we were kids and we wanted to persuade our parents to give us more ice cream, all the way to being a diplomat and being a commission official that you persuade, meaning convince and negotiate with member states, with the council, with parliament, with a whole range of stakeholders. So how can you persuade better by these or using these tools for speeches, meetings, and others? So just one idea there is to come up with better arguments. So prompt GPT or a tool of that kind to say, okay, again, I'm giving context. There's a trilogue between the Commission, Council, and Parliament delegation planned on the scheduling of the Commissioner designates hearings, right? Pretty actual current stuff. give me 10 arguments using Cialdini's persuasion framework. Now, that's those of you who are in comms might know that's a pretty famous book. Cialdini is the author, and he came up with a 7-step framework of how to be more persuasive, whether in government, in business, in private life. So I'm referring to that framework without actually giving that framework, but GPT can very easily look it up and to say, so there's that question, what is the book? Cialdini is the author, Persuasion, that's the title of the book. There's a sequel to it, it's called Persuasion. So there are two parts of that, but you look up Cialdini's name, you'll immediately find it. To convince the parliament and the council delegations that the hearings must happen as soon as possible, right? Again, it's something you may come up intuitively with great arguments and messages and all that, but there might be 2, 3, 5 ideas you just didn't think about. And it gives you that spark to say, okay, that could be a good reasoning, that could be a good way. Now, certainly this is just a random example, but you can adapt that for more serious stuff, for more consequential stuff in business negotiations, and so on. And we're hopefully going to have a few questions, so feel free to ask those questions in the chat. But a general point I wanted to make is what often happens with GPT, with these large language models, is that they give you or take you to 80% of the solution. So they give you a great draft, they give you a pretty good outline, they give you an interesting analysis, but it's not the final product. And many people who use the tool say, I mean, there were some bogus stuff in it, or the style wasn't really mine. In many cases, it depends on the right prompting, which I trust you have seen already how important that is. But the next bit is, don't expect perfection as an output. So, and often it's iterative. So it gives you something, and then you can follow conversations with it or add certain things and refine it so it will be in line with your expectations. So that's the 20% that you add your judgment, your value, your thoughts, your analysis. I'll pause for a second. Jacques, is there anything that I may have left out, or some ideas that came to mind, that's something you want to add while I take a sip of water?
No, absolutely not. I think this is really interesting and really good to mention that ChatGPT will not know everything, and there's always going to be hallucinations and poor results. And I think the way to sort of combat or battle these poor results is to think about providing better data in the prompts. So as Andras mentioned, try to be as specific as possible, try to be as detailed as possible for what you're trying to achieve, the sort of audience you want, the style. All these different things will be helpful for the AI tools to identify what you're trying to do, and then obviously improve the output. Another way is to browse the web to double check the information to make sure that everything makes sense or everything is correct with the output that you're receiving. Knowledge based on data input. So it's really key here as well that you focus on the right knowledge. And the last point is about requesting references. So whenever you are asking AI to look through a specific document or a specific link on the web, is to ask for specific references. So to ask the AI tool to clearly define the references, the sources, so that you can double check and make sure that the information is valid and correct.
Just one point to highlight. So number 2, when it says browse the web, that's an instruction you are giving to the tool. So you say, okay, I'm looking for ideas for my birthday party. Browse the web of what's available in Belgium in October.
And we also want to, encourage you not to be afraid of these tools. So we think that AI will not replace your job, but someone using AI will. So it's really key here that we upscale our teams and our staff on how to use these tools. So we shouldn't be afraid of them. We should actually embrace what is happening in our space. We shouldn't be using AI as Google. We should be using AI as a tool that can help us get better information, make better informed decisions, summarize and analyze text, and just save time, as someone said in the comments. And we shouldn't be trusting it fully. As we said, it's a system that wants to please us. It wants to bring the most, what it think is the most relevant information the fastest. So it's really key here that we stay cautious as to the information that we receive, and we don't trust it fully. We have to question it, we have to provide better details, and we have to be cautious at all times.
Jumping for a second, I see Maria Estel's question, and the previous one was also related to how it interacts with the web and information on the web. And GPT and similar tools, they have a certain knowledge, but not necessarily the most up-to-date and the most recent information. Hence the instruction to search the web, because if your query does require the most recent information, then you give it an extra nudge to actually look at what's online and what's available, unless you can feed that in a structured way. Because browsing the web, again, technically speaking, it's not necessarily easy to retrieve information for a tool like GPT, because web pages are often a bit convoluted or in a different format. Back to you, Jacques.
And we personally think that AI has revolutionized the way we're thinking. So it's not necessarily about solving a problem and getting better answers. It's about asking better questions. So when we think about using these AI tools, the answers we're going to get as time goes by, we're going to get better answers. We're going to get answers and faster. We're going to get a lot more data and a lot more output. But it's our responsibility to ask better questions, to be more detailed, and to be more strategic when we're using these tools. So something to keep in mind when you're trying to use these tools in your work or in your personal life, it's always about asking better questions. Like, what specific question could I ask AI to get a specific output? And this is how you get better results.
Right. I think there's a question from Victor, so I'll address it head on. So EU institutions have obviously very strict rules on the use of their information by the staff, and how can you prevent these problems when using AI tools? And occasionally you're not even allowed to do so. And everything depends on how much proprietary information do you, and I say in air quotes, need to feed into the tool to give you the right answers. Because sometimes, or in many cases, you don't need, and of course you're not even allowed, but you don't even need to use any sensitive or proprietary information that you as a commission official have, because you are interested in creating ideas, in brainstorming things. You can look at it and for public sources. A vast number of information or vast resources are publicly available in the right format with this kind of commission draft. The minute it's published, the minute it's in the official journal, you can immediately use that in a public tool. So is really having that proper, what is the word, delimitation as to what is something that I must protect as a professional secret versus other information that can be just as helpful for the right idea or the right analysis or the right prompt. And then as a final bit, before we close off, in respect of everyone's time and being very strict on the timing of 45 minutes, wanted to share that we offer workshops. If you are interested or your teams are interested, we are available for speaking opportunities online or in person, especially if it's a sunny location, then we give a big discount. And on a more serious note, consultancy is something that we also do to advise you and guide you. Not necessarily, and not even on a very technical level, but certainly the mindset, the system, the workflows, and then the actual coding bit, as if it needs coding, and increasingly it's less and less. This is easy to set up as long as you are aware of what you need. And there is internal support, endorsement and support based on the policies and based on the systems that need to approve your work. So thank you so much for your time and for your interest. I hope we gave you a couple of ideas. I hope we gave you a bit of inspiration. And it was a bit fast-paced, 45-minute presentation, but there's a lot more to it. So please check out on the website, follow us on LinkedIn, make sure that we are in conversation. And if you have ideas, you have discoveries, you have questions, we're more than happy to answer them. And we keep experimenting, we keep coming up with new ideas. And the most important thing is to be very practical, not to do this for the sake of it, but to actually help your work and make your work not just more efficient, but more resourceful and more creative in many ways to see what otherwise you may not have seen. Voila. With that, thank you so much. Appreciate your time and your attention. And those of you who are interested in other editions, we have 2 more to go. So you're welcome to join those as well. Thank you so much. Chuck?
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye, everyone. Have a nice evening.